Yes, my people, please, abeg una watch this video, this governor, the way they address the people. Please, if today is your first time coming across my page, please kindly follow this page, share this video. Una share and make go viral.
My dear people of Kaduna State, with just about 100 days before leaving office and elections round the corner, it was my intention to host another media chat to interact with the people of our state in the next few days. While I still hope to do so, I feel the need to address you all today due to the unprecedentedly cruel situation our people and their livelihoods have been thrown into, particularly in the last 2 to 3 weeks by the decisions, actions and inactions of the federal government of Nigeria. On behalf of the government of Kaduna State, I wish to express our deepest regret at the needless suffering you are enduring as a result of the prolonged fuel shortage and the difficulties occasioned by the so-called currency redesign policy of the Central Bank of Nigeria. We understand your pain. I assure you that as your state governor, I've been working with my colleagues to do everything in our power to end these pains, while publicly supporting what appeared to be a beneficial policy. We innocently engaged privately with the President and the leadership of the Central Bank of Nigeria to review the implementation of the policy so as to reduce its negative impact on the lives and livelihoods of our people and end the pain being inflicted on citizens. In the absence of any progress to modify implementation on the part of the architects, we were forced to go public about 2 weeks ago with our concerns and demand that this suffering must stop. We take seriously our duty to protect ordinary people from the consequences of these policy fiascos. The sad fact is that the victims of these mindless policies are the people that elected us. It is their welfare that is being threatened. Many of our people have been left in a situation where the money they put in banks has literally been confiscated, depriving them of the ability to buy food and basic necessities. Our traders cannot sell as much as they used to because their customers have no access to their hard-earned money. We've been officially informed that the currency redesign policy is to reduce money laundering and render useless stashes of high-denomination Naira that many politicians and public officers have accumulated through corruption and other illicit activities. As earlier stated, we are fully in support of such a policy, and we made this public from the very beginning. We had privately expressed concerns about the timing of the currency design policy and the unrealistic timeline for its implementation. We were assured that all steps have been taken to ensure that we avoid the recent experience of India, where implementation of a similar demonetization policy targeted at politicians ended up hurting the poorest and small businesses the most. In official briefings to the President, the Central Bank of Nigeria constantly alluded to the fact that the policy also targets politicians who have accumulated a huge war chest for vote buying during the forthcoming elections. It is now clear that the President has been deceived by the Central Bank of Nigeria and some elements in his government into buying into this overarching narrative in the name of ensuring free and fair elections in 2023. It is important for the people of Kaduna State and indeed Nigeria to know that contrary to the public announcements and apparent good intentions, this policy was conceived and sold to the President by officials who completely lost out in the gubernatorial and presidential primaries of the APC in June 2022. Once Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu emerged as the candidate in June 2022 and subsequently did not pick one of them as his running mate, this currency redesign policy was conceived to ensure that the APC presidential candidate is deprived of what they allege is a humongous war chest. They also sought to achieve any one or more of the following objectives. Number one, to create a nationwide shortage of cash so that citizens are incited to vote against APC candidates across the board, resulting in massive losses for the party in all the elections. Number two, ensure that the cash crunch is so serious, along with the contrived and enduring fuel shortage existing since September 2022, that the 2023 elections do not hold at all, leading to an interim national government to be led by a retired army general. And number three, sustain the climate of shortage of fuel, food and other necessities, leading to mass protests, violence and breakdown of law and order that will provide a fertile foundation for a military takeover. In the pursuit of these objectives, the Central Bank of Nigeria and these other disgruntled federal officials have so far convinced the president that it is fine for ordinary citizens to be dispossessed of their hard-earned money and starved if need be, while small and medium-sized businesses are deprived of access to their capital, thereby bringing trade and exchange to a grinding halt. All our efforts to modify implementation of the policy to avoid what we assumed were unintended consequences were unsuccessful. I chose to speak out first as one person that has been particularly close to the president, believing that his actions were motivated by innocence and mindful of his legacy. I have no regrets for doing my duty in this regard. One day, the president will appreciate what some of us are being insulted for today. Yet, the politicians that the officials have convinced the president to regard as the real targets of the currency redesign policy have not been impeded in any way by it so far. Indeed, two of the presidential candidates and a running mate of the opposition parties own or have preferred access to some of the licensed commercial banks. For that reason, and by clandestine arrangements, these politicians have access to hundreds of millions of new notes in Naira, while the traders, merchants, students, and other citizens are queuing for days to withdraw a few thousand Naira just to buy food and necessaries. Within 2 to 3 weeks of implementation, it was very clear to everyone that the architects of this policy can see that it is our people that are being terribly affected and not the politicians. It is quite unfortunate that many politicians who either own banks or have privileged access to money in cash are so insulated from the pains of Talakawa that they are recklessly endorsing a policy that is being badly implemented. I'm referring here to the comments by the candidate of one of the opposition parties who expressed opposition to the recommendation first of the APC state governors and subsequently of all the governors under the auspices of the Nigerian Governors Forum that the implementation timeline be extended to enable old and new notes to be legal tender side by side until the cash shortage ends. My dear people of Kaduna State, let me explain how the architects of this policy intentionally designed it to fail. The total currency in circulation in Nigeria was estimated at 3.2 trillion naira at the end of 2022. According to the Central Bank of Nigeria, 2.1 trillion has so far been withdrawn as at early February. The CBN also claimed that 700 billion is the amount of cash needed for their functioning vision of a cashless Nigerian economy. The chief economic advisor to the president, Dr. Doyin Salami, disagrees with this estimate and believes that at least 2 trillion naira of currency needs to be in circulation for our economic sustainability. Other experts variously estimate this to be between 1.2 trillion and above. So the Central Bank of Nigeria number of 700 billion is not realistic. The CBN informed the president at the very beginning that the Mint, that is the Nigerian Security Printing and Minting Company, has enough capacity to print the needed currency in circulation within the 6-week time frame for the so-called cash swap. By its own admission, only 400 billion naira worth of new notes had been printed for the Central Bank of Nigeria as at early February. The current cash shortage was therefore designed from the beginning. The president was lied to about the domestic capacity of the Mint to print. And even if the announced 700 billion naira was printed, it would have been grossly inadequate anyway. Imagine then printing only 400 billion and making most of it unavailable to the commercial banks, but passed to favored entities through special and clandestine arrangements. How can the Central Bank of Nigeria collect 2.1 trillion from citizens and print only 400 billion? Is this not a clear case of economic sabotage? It is bad economics to so curtail economic activity and the velocity of circulation of money. It is also insensitive to deliberately cause cash shortage and then seek to instigate the public against the mostly innocent commercial banks. Even the most honest and prudent action by banks cannot magically make 400 billion to look like 2.1 trillion, or have the same spread and availability like the central bank should have ensured. As a regulator, the Central Bank of Nigeria should not be seen to be setting up the banking sector as the public enemy to cover up the glaring failure in its design and implementation of the so-called cash swap policy. We have repeatedly appealed to the federal government to allow whatever remains of the old notes to circulate concurrently with the new notes. We recommended that the federal government should also hasten to ensure that more of the new notes are printed and brought into circulation. We thought that if the Nigerian Mint is incapable of printing the volume of cash needed as it appears, then necessary steps must urgently be taken to get a reliable supply source. There is no reason why the old notes and the new notes should not coexist until the old notes are gradually withdrawn over the years, as is done in the United Kingdom, Saudi Arabia, and many other countries. It is unfortunate that in implementing this policy, Nigeria is departing from global best practice without any compelling justification. The Kaduna State government did all this not in opposition to any person or authority, but because we stand with our people and their interests. When it was clear that our recommendations will not be seriously considered, the Kaduna State government decided, along with the governments of Kogi and Zamfara states, to declare a dispute with the federal government of Nigeria. In line with the provisions of the 1999 Constitution as amended, we approached the Supreme Court of Nigeria to invoke its original jurisdiction to hear us and the cries of our people. The court did on February 8th and ordered that the deadline of February 10th for all the old notes ceasing to be legal tender to be rescinded until the determination of the suit. This ruling applies to the federal government and its agencies like the Central Bank of Nigeria and indeed all commercial banks. We are grateful to the Supreme Court for this ruling, and we had hoped that compliance by the CBN and the banks would bring relief to our people. It is now clear that the architects of this policy are determined to continue to inflict maximum pain on the citizens to achieve their objectives outlined earlier. It was our hope that the federal government of Nigeria would welcome the injunction issued by the Supreme Court as an opportunity to mitigate the needless human suffering being experienced and correct its course on this matter. There is no emergency situation that justifies the rushed and seemingly deliberate incompetent execution of this policy. We suggested that compliance with the ruling would include adopting a whole-of-government approach that involves the agencies of the federal government and state governments in modifying the design, execution, and implementation of the policy. Even when confronted with the facts above, the CBN and its masters remain determined to implement their agenda no matter how much human suffering, death, and destruction results. It is clear that the architects of this policy always had objectives that are totally in conflict with public interest, peace, and the unity of Nigeria. They neither considered our suggestions in line with the court order, nor respected the unanimous resolution of the Council of State. It is also quite revealing that the federal government and its agencies not only disobeyed the February 8th ruling by continuing to say the February 10th deadline stands, it is also shocking to see the blatant violation of the subsisting and continuing order of the Supreme Court that all the old and new notes should continue to be legal tender until it gives judgment in the case filed by the Kaduna State government along with several others. The address by the President earlier this morning, limiting the legal standard status of old notes to only 200 Naira, amounts to total disregard and disobedience of the ruling of February 8th, which was extended further yesterday by the Supreme Court of Nigeria. The misguided action of the Attorney General to mislead the President into engaging in this public violation of the order of the highest court of the land shows how desperate the policy architects are to cause national chaos by showing open contempt for the judiciary. The decision to recognize only 200 Naira as legal tender till April that the President announced this morning was offered to the state governments as part of proposals for an out-of-court settlement 3 days ago. The federal government asserted that this was offered because all the old 1,000 Naira and 500 Naira notes had been destroyed. We rejected the offer and proved to the officials that not a single high denomination note had been destroyed. We also believe that circulating 200 Naira only to be inadequate in alleviating the suffering that we see every day in our states. We insisted that all the components of the Supreme Court order should be complied with fully. But back home, what do we do here in Kaduna State? My dear people of Kaduna State, with the foregoing revelations, it is clear that our peaceful coexistence as a state and a nation is being placed under deliberate danger using the intentional combination of fuel and cash supply disruptions. These evil people, using the instrumentality of the federal government and the President as convenient covers, are willing to truncate our democracy because they have personally lost out. They are massively deploying resources and tools to defeat the political party that gave us all the platform to serve the country, just because they could not impose the candidates of their choice on us. Let us not help them achieve their objectives. Let us stay calm and peaceful and support the lawful means being utilized to solve our problems. On behalf of the Kaduna State government, I wish to assure you that none of you would lose the money you have in old notes. Let no artificial or illegal deadline frighten you. Whether you live in towns, villages, or in our isolated rural communities, do not feel stampeded to deposit your old notes into the banks. Hold on to them. Continue to use them as legal tender as ordered by the Supreme Court of Nigeria. No deadline can render them worthless, ever. The law is on your side. The Central Bank of Nigeria Act 2007 in Section 20, subsection 3, and the Bills of Exchange Act both oblige the Central Bank of Nigeria to recognize your old notes and give you value in new notes whenever you bring them to the CBN, even in the next 100 years. Therefore, as your governor, I wish to assure you that the Kaduna State government, in collaboration with elected legislators, our traditional institution, elected local government councils, markets and traders associations, and so on, will help you collect, record, document, collect and deliver all your old notes to the Kaduna branch of the Central Bank on your behalf into the new ones immediately after the elections. We'll also ensure the delivery of your new notes to your various locations without any hardship or expense on your part. We shall save you any panic and the stress of a long journey from your community to the CBN office in our state capital from March until the end of December 2023, if need be, by the grace of God. For the avoidance of doubt, all the old and new notes shall remain in use as legal tender in Kaduna State until the Supreme Court of Nigeria decides otherwise. I therefore appeal to all the residents of Kaduna State to continue to use the old and new notes side by side without any fear. The Kaduna State government and its agencies shall seal any facility that refuses to accept the old notes as legal tender and prosecute the owners. If need be, we shall take further consequential actions available to us under the law. While I urge you all not to fall for these antics of the enemies of Nigeria, please be patient and continue to exercise resilience in the face of open provocation and deliberate disinformation. We encourage you to be ready with your permanent voter's card to vote in the February 25th Presidential and National Assembly elections. We are doing all we can to ensure that it is peaceful, orderly, and hitch-free. I appeal to you to understand the shenanigans of these unpatriotic elements in Abuja and ensure you vote massively for the intended victims of these last-minute policies of needless hardship and incitement of the citizens. Our party, the APC, and the candidates in all of the elections. The Kaduna State government is making this appeal and taking all these measures to shield our people from the terrible consequences of the currency redesign policy. We seek to protect our people's hard-earned money, their ability to engage in trade and exchange, and buy what they need. We also seek to protect their civic rights, liberties, and freedoms under a democratic dispensation. I call on the people of Kaduna State to remain peaceful and vigilant in the face of brazen attempts to engineer crisis in order to get a pretext for unconstitutional or undemocratic actions. In conclusion, our presidential candidate Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu has asked me to convey his greetings, empathy, and words of encouragement to the good people of Kaduna State. He urges us to remain patient, pray for our country, and remain vigilant in our pursuit of renewed hope. Thank you all for listening. God bless Kaduna State. God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria.